I'm delighted to welcome today Sunette van den Heever. And you know, I was just saying, Sunette, before we started recording, and those that have been through the interview process will know how much I enjoy these interviews. And I actually had to stop Sunette short just before because I could see we were going to start chatting nicely. So I said to her, listen, let's just get the formalities out the way and then let's get on with the actual interview. Right, we're in the interview. Sunette,
Okay.
welcome.
Morning. Thank you.
Looking forward to this, and please tell us a bit about yourself and
Yes.
who you are, and yeah, let's hear that.
Yes, I'm Sunette van den Heever, and I've got a practice stationed in Pretoria, in Gauteng. I am an educational psychologist by registration, but very soon after my registration, my exposure and experience to the court procedures and court work started. I registered around 1999, and right after actually like during the time of registration, I with another colleague we wrote a diversion program for drug offenders, which was accepted by the magistrates courts in Pretoria, which was very interesting because at that stage there was quite a problem with substance abuse and children and vulnerable individuals that have been used to be runners, and then they would be caught, and I think there was a gap in terms of what do they do with these individuals. So that was very interesting. For 2 years I had a drug rehabilitation program, which I thoroughly enjoyed, very challenging. And after that, actually during that time, my first court appearance occurred. I was asked by the Legal Aid Society to assess a group of sexual assault victims with 2 pedophiles. They had numerous children that were abused, and I had to assess some of them, and had the daunting experience of going to court with quite a challenging magistrate at that time.
Oh, yeah.
But survived it, and then from there on, I also by the Legal Aid Society was given clients for pre-sentencing reports for murder accused individuals, also substance abuse, multi-murders. That I did for quite some time. Also interesting in terms of court appearance. And then after that, I became involved with family law, did custody assessments, and then later on primary dispute assessments. And I would say from about 2011, the practice is mainly involved with medical legal work. We do it on a daily basis. We are a lovely team at the office. I'm the psychologist, and there are psychometrists and other individuals. So we do personal injury, medical negligence, RAF work, motor vehicle accident work. And then since 2021, I did that ABIMI course with the American Board of Medical Examiners to conduct independent psychological assessments. I've been doing work in sub-Saharan Africa, assessing individuals that were not part of the soldiers that worked in Afghanistan and Iraq, but these were people that worked there in cleaning, food service, general workers, and then they put in claims with the employers, and then I work for an insurance carriers and American lawyers. I've been doing depositions lately, which I'm the need for some guidance in terms of depositions. I will discuss that with you as well. I don't know if you know anybody that does psych IME assessments and depositions. So that's basically
what you, yeah.
Yeah, I thought you might, because I think a deposition to me is different than a high court appearance.
Yeah.
So that's in a nutshell how the career has developed.
Oh, phenomenal. I mean, yeah, there's so much locked up in what you've just put into a few short sentences now. And you talk about there's so much, but the one that maybe to start with is that experience of dealing with children within that criminal context, particularly within the sexual context, in criminal proceedings, and the challenges that go with that. The specific challenges on a professional level, dealing with children. How do you deal with children? It's not like
Yes,
dealing with an adult. It's a very different experience,
yes,
very different way of approaching them. And of course, our court systems, I think, are quite
yes,
good at points in structuring that. Certainly, that they should be sensitive to that, but from the advocate's perspective, dealing with those children, how do you cross-examine? How do you question? How do you put that whole fact-finding exercise in itself is a whole area with particular skill sets and what have you. I don't do criminal work anymore, but I
yeah.
did about more than 10 years. I did quite a lot of criminal work, magistrate and
Okay.
high court, yeah. And
Oh, so you're
high
quite
court,
familiar with it. Yes,
yeah. The magistrates court, but now that was some years back, so I'm sure there've been changes, but the basics I'm sure are the same of the challenges that one faces. Then high court I did pro de murder defenses only, so we didn't do sexual
yes,
type work in the high court. That was all
yes,
regional court type work. But yeah,
yes.
maybe you can just
Yeah.
chat to us a little bit about that. I thought that was particularly interesting.
Well, I find that when it comes to children that are victims of sexual abuse or sexual assault, it's a very, I think the system definitely fails the children. Um, there are numerous court dates where the
Yeah.
children are in the same room with the alleged offenders, where they have to attend the court proceedings, where, they're being traumatized each and every
Mm,
time.
mm,
I found the cross-examination of the children, well, to me, was quite upsetting.
mm,
The insensitivity of the legal professionals that have to, because it's not a black and white thing, and it's not like I can remember exactly what happened. And I found that to be sad, um, that children have to be exposed to and re-traumatized by the process, which one can understand because somebody else's life is on the line on the other
yeah.
end
Yeah.
and the
Mm,
truth. But I think that to me there's a lack in understanding the dynamics of a sexual abuse victim,
mm,
especially if it was incest and it's a prolonged period of time. And my exposure to these two pedophiles, they were actually like judo trainers. So it was like the grooming process was
yeah.
excellently done. And
Mm,
so those children were in two minds about this whole thing. And so to me, it's, there's a definite, and I don't know how can they do it differently, because
mm,
that's the way, testimony and evidence has
mm,
to
mm.
occur. But maybe if legal professionals are more, and even the judges, I mean, and the magistrate in this specific matter, she was completely uneducated in this matter. She started
Mm.
shouting at the children and say, "But how did you guys allow this?" And so I think you understand what I'm saying in terms of it's it's not a welcoming, friendly environment for children and they have to do this for their parents as well. And it was
Yeah.
difficult for me because, um, you work with prosecutors that they might be sick, or everybody would drive from Pretoria to wherever we have to be, and then you come there and you sit there and then nothing happens.
Mm.
Me and the children and everybody else, and that has happened not just in that specific case, but in many cases of uh, so the court preparation, to me was not thoroughly done, which is obviously part of the challenges that the magistrate courts are dealing with when it comes to sexual.
And you'll have heard in the course that you see that the challenge is that like a logistical one, resource related challenges. I mean,
Yeah.
magistrates are under huge pressure to get through
Yes.
workloads. Prosecutors are with heavy caseloads. And
Yes.
unfortunately, your quality is going to drop. But I
Yes.
completely agree with you. You know, the things when dealing with a child, it's such a more sensitive environment. But
Yes.
now the problem is how do you now balance that with what at the end of the day has to be a fairly, I don't want to use the
Yes.
word brutal, but it has to be robust. You have to, you know, if somebody's lying, or if a person, for instance, is putting
Yes.
ideas in that child's head, that needs to be exposed. And when you get to this real hard edge of society where you've got two individuals saying different versions
Yes.
of the
Yes.
facts, this is the best tool that we
Yes.
as a society
Exactly.
have, is you've got to cross-examine. And
Yes.
cross-examination can be a wonderful tool to establish the truth, because people that have been getting away with lying for years and years, when they hit the court system
Yes.
and they're cross-examined, really they should then be exposed. But unfortunately, there is a hard edge to cross-examination that doesn't fit well with, you know, the children's environment.
Yes.
And I think that the point that you've raised is a very, very important one, is that training and education for
Yes.
the legal, the magistrates, I think most importantly, prosecutors possibly as well. But you know, that sort of to sensitize them to certain issues and to equip them with
Yes.
certain issues. I know they do quite a lot
Definitely.
of training, but I think that is where
Yes.
you can then allow that magistrate to sort of mold the process and be sensitive
Yes.
to what's happening at like a broader level.
Definitely. Yes. And understand the dynamics of somebody who has been abused for several years or has been exposed to a specific trauma of a sexual nature. I think just a bit of that understanding would already
Yeah.
help.
No, very much so. Listen, the other point that you made, there were a couple that were very interesting, but the other one that really caught my attention is these depositions for, it sounds like
Yeah.
sort of auxiliary services in, where do you say, Afghanistan?
Well, the most of the clients were employed in Afghanistan and Iraq, and
Okay.
after the Americans withdrew, and they
Mm,
had to go back to their home countries, many of these individuals have been working in these war zone areas for years,
mm,
and they have been earning a good income, which
mm,
placed them within their communities
mm,
in a certain standard of living. So
mm,
once because they only get a few weeks leave a year, so they are kind of like not completely in tune with their families and their children and their wives, and then all of a sudden they had to come back home and they lost their identity in terms of the income. They'd looked after many people.
mm, mm,
Um, they couldn't find work that easily. So
mm,
those people do struggle with the adjustment, but they have got the right to lay a claim. So they lay a claim of uh, PTSD or emotional stress or psychopathology, some or other diagnosis. Then they go in their home country. There's like psychiatrists that then diagnose them. And interestingly enough, over 6 years periods, they get sicker and sicker and sicker, according to these psychiatrists. So then when it comes to depositions, uh, I have to then determine the causation, or testify on the causation between their work experience and the
oh,
symptomology they have. Now,
mm,
most of these people, or all of them, they were not soldiers. They were protected. They worked in the camps. Obviously, there were rockets and mortars and everything
mhm,
around them. But
mhm,
they chose to live there, to work there, and were most of them were very disappointed when obviously this lucrative opportunity came to an end.
mm,
So it's quite an interesting dynamics that's happening at the moment, where they can put in this claim and find it difficult to. Sorry, I just want to check these WhatsApp, just put them off. So then in a deposition, you've got obviously their lawyer and their law firm, and then the insurance carriers' law firms, where which does the questioning, which is also quite
mhm.
challenging for me.
And then what is the process? So they do the deposition, and then what? There's a hearing.
There's a hearing. There's a hearing.
And what is this, under the jurisdiction of their home country, or is this like a
Of
US
the,
jurisdiction, or
it's
how does it work?
it's a US jurisdiction because it is American lawyers. So the
Yeah.
insurance
So
carriers, they
they're claiming against the US military, right? Is that right?
they're claiming against the companies
Oh, I
who were the
see. The
employers who
contractors. Oh, I
placed
understand.
them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
So then their companies have got insurance carriers, and their
Oh,
insurance
I understand.
carriers
Yes.
have got law firms to represent them.
Yes.
So the insurance carrier would make an appointment for a psych IME assessment, say with myself. It's done virtually because the client is either in Uganda or in Kenya. There were some in South Africa or Kuwait or London. Then we conduct a virtual assessment. I compile a report, and then you have this hearing where my attorney would, or the insurance carrier's attorney, that's the defendant, would then take you through your report, what your findings were, and then the plaintiff's attorney is obviously his ultimate purpose is to discredit as far as possible,
Yeah.
because he's got reports from other psychiatrists or psychologists to stipulate the intensity of the
Mm,
disability, because it's actually a
mm,
disability claim that
mm,
the claimant or the
mm,
client has placed in, to
mm,
say that
mm,
because of all of this, I can no longer do any work, or this
mm,
is what I need. This is kind of
mm,
the loss. So it's
mm.
quite interesting to determine the causation, if any, of these.
Very much so. Gee, that's very challenging.
Yes.
And then are these hearings conducted virtually?
Yes, I conducted virtually. What happens is a court interpreter and a court facilitator who sits, the people that I've worked with do not in the same state as the attorneys. So everything is conducted virtually. I'm in South Africa, then I've got a notary that comes to my office. I've got an individual sitting in another office that has to ensure that the whole process is taken, that everything happens as it should. And then you've got two attorneys, the one for the plaintiff and the one for the defendant, all virtually.
Oh, that's incredible. And then tell me, on that virtual hearing, how do they deal with documentation? Is that all electronic and put on screen? And does that all
Yes,
come smoothly?
yes.
And what about your communications network? And is that also?
Yeah, that happens quite smoothly. It's all happening on Teams. If I understand correctly, it's actually the court facilitator who sets up everything. In the depositions that I have, the client is from Kenya has not been, I don't know, I have not been informed that the client is also virtually listening in or there. It's usually
Who's the, you mean the client, as in the plaintiff, you mean?
as yes, the
Oh, I
plaintiff
see.
who's
So,
laid the claim.
because I was just wondering, now the plaintiff's communication, obviously they will very often have a cell phone, but the signal is so patchy, and in this
Exactly.
country, well, the reason I'm interested in is this: we struggle with virtual hearings. We have some technological and
Yes.
infrastructure problems. So how do they deal with that as far as the claimant or the plaintiff is concerned?
Well, the insurance carriers have got case managers in several countries, and those case managers and companies in, say, for instance, Kenya, Uganda, Kuwait, London, wherever, they are employed by a specific insurance carrier. So their duty is to set up this whole thing, and then the client comes to their office, and
Oh,
they have
yes,
got
yes,
this
yes,
whole
yes. Yeah.
infrastructure,
Oh,
and
that's
they've got the
fantastic.
translators and
Mm.
whatever needs. And then with the deposition, you've got like the court facilitator who then tunes everybody into the team meeting. And I have not had any difficulties in terms of networking. During the time of load shedding, I think that might have been challenging
A
because
specific
I don't
South
think
African related challenge. Yeah,
yes,
yeah, all right. How do they deal with that?
there's no understanding and
Yeah,
no
they can't conceptualize it. You know what I mean?
they can't consider. They kind of like,
I
what are
know.
you talking
I know,
about?
I know. When I speak to colleagues overseas or I visit overseas and I try to
Yes,
explain loan shedding to them, they just cannot. It's beyond their universe. You know what I
correct.
mean? They're beyond their frame of reference. And it's logistical problems. And the South
Yes.
Africans, it's like, oh, it's load shedding. All right, we switch to our support system. We're so used to it now, you know. But when
We've
we
got,
all
I
got
mean,
our backups, you know.
we've got all these things in our offices that switch to these ports and
Yeah, and now listen, I think we've now most of us, by and large, now and then you get caught out
yes.
for some one reason or another. But by and large, we've got our backup systems and everything. But it's such a South African experience. You just cannot explain it to anybody else. There's a great video clip on YouTube where there's a soccer match going on, and then suddenly the stadium goes black, and the commentators say load shedding, and it's like everybody laughs. It's a South African thing. And then they got to stop the game for a few minutes and you got to refire up whatever generator or whatever they work, their backup system or the batteries or whatever. And the floodlights sort of come on half bright and everyone carries on playing. It's like that's
It's like
part of
you
South
just have
Africa.
to carry on with your normal
You can
duties.
and it's a very South African response to it as well. Is here
Yes,
it comes a major challenge. Okay, at first it threw us, now we're all used to it. We've got an app and we find a solution.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
It was quite challenging when we started off because obviously in Kenya and Uganda, they also used to load shedding. But what
Oh, right.
we had an additional challenge was during that time where those major cables under the sea broke.
Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, yeah. Suddenly it gets snarled up or something, and some ship's anchor
We
snags the whole of
pushed.
Africa. The whole of Africa goes down.
Yet what I also
Anyway,
want to out
mm,
in any case.
yeah. Anyway, sorry, you were saying.
No, but I think I'll get to it when it comes to suggestions and needs. I'll get to that later. In
Okay,
terms,
all right.
what I can also mention it now is that maybe in case I might forget, I think that if you do have an individual or a colleague that is
Mm,
exposed to these psych IMEs and the depositions,
mm,
because what I
mm,
find is that my counterparts have got these, and luckily you addressed it in one of the modules. They've got these vague articles where if you have been in Afghanistan, then you are kind of like a veteran, and then this overgeneralization of
mm-hmm.
of symptomology,
Yeah.
and
Mm.
forgetting the merits of each individual client.
Individual, 100%. Yeah. Mm.
So
No, very important.
if you can put me in contact, or if you know of anybody who has done research or has got articles of the contrary, that it
Mm,
doesn't necessarily mean that if you were in Iraq then and you heard rockets. I mean, we live in South Africa. According to
mm,
those criteria, we would all kind of like be a little bit post-traumatic stress
mm, mm.
victims. I don't
Well,
know
maybe
if
we
you have
are.
a colleague. I think we do.
I'm telling you. But anyway, no, listen, if you
Yes,
could just drop Zita a WhatsApp,
I
just
will.
set it out in a WhatsApp and on exactly what it is, we can try and distribute that and let's see if we can get a response for you.
Okay, all
Thanks,
right.
thanks, thanks, Sunette. All right, I think our time is nearly up. Any concluding remarks that you'd like to make?
Well, I'm looking forward to the modules that are coming up in
Mm,
terms of court preparation. I love your initiative of having a team approach between advocates and attorneys and experts. I
yeah,
think you know that is not something that happens on a daily basis. And
yeah,
since you mentioned it, I have been enforcing it because I think it's the way that it should be. I love the course, I love the information, and I think it's wonderful that you address this aspect. I have been in this industry for many years, 15 years, and I find it wonderful that you are setting criteria and educating us. And
yeah,
I'm checkboxing, if I'm on the right track every time.
yeah.
And
Well, the thing is, even if you don't assimilate everything, just as a start and to start assimilating, because I mean, I've been doing this now for more than 25 years, but my
Yeah.
real joy within, I enjoy law generally, but my real joy is working with experts. I find it intellectually very stimulating and very rewarding. It's a type of area of law where it can be challenging. And as I often say, is that when you've got an expert in a trial matter, that expert, almost by definition, is going to have a significant role in the outcome of that case, if
Yes.
not decisive, you know. So it's important work, but you know, we're using experts more and more within the legal system, and this body of principles around expert evidence is developing, and the judges are
Yes.
expecting, as that happens, higher standards from the experts. There's no standardized, detailed approach as to what experts are required of experts, and so that's where the course really came from. And but with a very practical focus, legal from a legal perspective, from the legal lens, but practical day-to-day experience of what the courts expect you to do. And
Yes.
that's really the purpose of the course. Sunette, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Let's see.
It's been enthralling. You know, again, you know, I say it every time and improved right every time. I've absolutely loved it. It's been a fantastic interview.
Thank
I
you.
found it very, very interesting on so many levels. We could have spoken for 2 hours, but
Thank you
anyway,
very
listen, it's
much.
been lovely to get to know you, and I really just, as with everybody, want to honor your professionalism, your dedication to self-improvement, and we all know as professionals, we know what it takes to get to where you are, and we know what it takes to stay where you are, and it's really a lifelong experience, and this interview is
Thank
really
you.
there to honor you and your professionalism. So thank you so much,
Thank you
Sunette.
very much. Thank
Thank
you
you
very
very much.
much.
Okay,
Have
good.
a
Cheers
good
then.
one.
Bye
Take
bye.
care.
Bye bye.
Bye
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 bye.
bye.
Bye.